PL-600 Microsoft Certification Power Platform Solution Architect Question and Answer, Set 3. A retail company uses Microsoft Power Platform. The company has an inventory management app that was created as a model-driven app and an online store that was built as a custom app. The company uses a third-party shipping provider. You are creating a workflow to automate the order fulfillment process as follows. When an order is placed in the online store, the inventory app must be updated accordingly. The third-party shipping provider must be notified of the order along with the details through API calls. You need to ensure the run history of the workflow is retained for 90 days and the workflow is associated to a resource group. What should you use to create the automation? Option 1, Microsoft Azure Event Hubs. Option 2, Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. Option 3, Microsoft Power Automate Cloud Flow. Option 4, Microsoft Power Automate Desktop Flow. Correct answers, Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of identifying opportunities to integrate and extend Microsoft Power Platform solutions by using Azure. Logic Apps is used to automate complex business processes. The scenario is complex because there are multiple integration points. With Logic Apps, the run history of flows can be retained for 90 days, and the Logic App can be associated to a resource group. Power Automate Cloud Flows are used to automate business processes. They should be used for non-complex business processes. In addition, the workflow run history is retained for 30 days, not 90 days, and cloud flows can be associated to solutions, not resource groups. Power Automate Desktop Flows are used to automate business processes with older on-premises systems that have no API available. APIs are available in the integration from the scenario. Event Hubs is a scalable event streaming platform that can handle high volumes of streaming data. It does not provide business process automation features. A retailer undergoing digital transformation is deploying Microsoft Power Apps for its customer service agents. During the discovery process, you learn that new Power apps must connect to an existing application that the retailer is going to keep. You need to determine how to connect to the application. Which 2 questions should you ask about connecting to the application? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, does the application have an API? Option 2, does the application contain historical data? Option 3, does the application have data quality issues? Option 4, does the application have an available connector? Option 5, does the application have a database backup running? Correct answers, does the application have an API? Does the application have an available connector? Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of the discovery process when dealing with an organization's existing applications and data and how those applications might connect with Microsoft Power Platform. It is important for a solution architect to know whether a customer has a connector available for an existing application or whether Microsoft has a publicly available pre-built connector. Using a connector's pre-built actions and triggers will save the solution architect time and complexity when building and connecting from the Power Apps app. If a connector is not available, an API is the next best option. Having an API provides an interface for a custom connector to communicate with the application. Without an API, a solution architect might need to consider other technology. Knowing whether the existing application has historical data does not help a solution architect understand how to connect to the application. Similarly, knowing whether the application is facing data integrity issues does not help a solution architect understand how to connect to the application. Understanding whether the existing application has a database backup and restoration strategy is irrelevant for a solution architect because it does not relate to how to connect Power Apps to the application. You are assisting a customer with implementing a security model in Microsoft Dataverse. The customer has the following requirements. A non-interactive service account must be created for a server-to-server (S2S) application that will connect to Dataverse. Users must be assigned the minimum privileges and not require a license. The customer does not maintain any physical server infrastructure. You need to create a user account that meets the requirements. What should you create first? Option 1, an Active Directory account. Option 2, an app registration. Option 3, an application user. Option 4, a Microsoft 365 user. Correct answers, an app registration. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of identifying appropriate usage cases for app registrations. For the scenario, an application user is required. To create an application user, the first step is that an applicable app registration must exist on the tenant. Creating the actual application user is the second step, and it is not possible to do if an app registration does not exist already. An application user is typically ideal for S2S scenarios to provide secure and straightforward communication between Dataverse and any custom applications. Traditionally, creating a Microsoft 365 user account and then converting it to a non-interactive user account would be the preferred technical scenario. However, given the reliance on providing the user with a software license, this option does not meet the requirements. An Active Directory account would not be possible to create or use in the scenario because the company does not have an on-premises Active Directory environment. You are conducting a discovery call with a new customer and several stakeholders. The customer is a privately owned business. During the call, the customer uses industry-specific terms with which you are unfamiliar. You need to understand the terms. Which two actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, ask for clarification on the terms. Option 2, document the terms in a data dictionary. Option 3, research the terms using a search engine. Option 4, research the terms in a recently posted financial statement. Correct answers: ask for clarification on the terms. Document the terms in a data dictionary. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of conducting a discovery meeting to solicit requirements and what to do when the customer uses industry vocabulary in terms that are not well understood. It is important to document any customer-specific industry terms to keep a record of the vocabulary being used. A data definition document, data dictionary, can be used for this purpose and will also help the project team understand a customer's data definitions. It is important to seek clarity from the customer on any terminology and vocabulary being used that is not understood, or you risk making incorrect assumptions. A solution architect should learn as many high-level details about the customer and their business as possible during discovery. Reviewing the financial statements from a publicly traded company's earnings report will not provide clarity on business-specific industry terms. In addition, the customer is a privately held organization and is not required to post their financials publicly. Using a search engine to learn what a term might mean can yield good results, but there is a risk that the results are wrong. You still will need to validate the terminology and vocabulary with the customer to ensure it matches their definitions. You are conducting a discovery with a retailer who wants to digitally transform using Microsoft Power Platform. You need to understand the retailer's current business processes to make recommendations. Which two actions should you take to learn about the retailer's processes? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, job shadow employees. Option 2, ask about pain points in the current processes. Option 3, demonstrate your solution. Option 4, start a proof of concept. Option 5, deliver a high-level architecture assessment. Correct answers: job shadow employees. Ask about pain points in the current processes. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of the discovery process, during which a solution architect learns about an organization's existing processes, pain points, and requirements. Job shadowing is a good way to interact with different users and departments and see how they are currently working. This will allow a solution architect to extract information and understand the existing processes. Another good way to learn is to ask the customer directly about the processes they have in place and pain points they are experiencing. This process will help a solution architect extract information on how the proposed solution can streamline those business processes. Demonstrating the solution is performed after the discovery and capture of the requirements. A demonstration is used to validate the requirements with stakeholders and to help build confidence in the platform. A proof of concept is for when the customer needs to see the concept work in the context of the proposed solution. This occurs after the discovery is completed as part of pre-sales or solution design once the requirements are being validated. A high-level architecture assessment is a design phase deliverable that typically happens as part of a project long after discovery is complete. You are conducting initial project discovery for a customer who is implementing Microsoft Power Platform. You identify potential risks for the project that could affect the overall timelines and deliverables. You need to document these risks. Which type of document should you use? Option 1, an architecture diagram. Option 2, a data retention schedule. Option 3, an entity relationship diagram, ERD. Option 4, a project plan summary. Correct answers: a project plan summary. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of correctly identifying and documenting risk factors that may affect the success of a project. A project plan summary is an effective way to summarize several key aspects of the solution, including overall objectives, deliverables, timelines, and any risks that may have been identified as part of initial discovery. It is vital that risks are documented early so potential mitigation actions can be considered and any unexpected outcomes can be prevented as the project gets underway. Documenting risks within an architecture diagram is not appropriate because this type of document is not typically concerned with lower-level detail points. Instead, an architecture diagram should be used to demonstrate the key components within the architecture, to show how each component fits together, and to clearly indicate which Microsoft Power Platform and non-Microsoft Power Platform components need to be used. Using a data retention schedule to document risks is also inappropriate because this document is instead concerned with identifying the key information categories within the solution and how these categories need to be maintained appropriately across the life cycle of the solution. Retention of data for the minimum period necessary is important for many organizations globally, particularly for ones working within regulated industries or certain legal jurisdictions. An ERD is most appropriately used to provide visual indication of the data model of the solution. It can also provide a good blueprint of what will be built using Dataverse or any other data source as part of the solution. Documenting low-level details regarding risks in this document is not appropriate because this document type is primarily visual rather than text-based. You are conducting performance testing on a new Microsoft Power Apps app for a client. The app is hosted in the United States. Several business users are in the United Kingdom. One user in the United Kingdom notes that even during off-peak times, the app runs very slowly. You need to diagnose the app performance issue. Which two factors should you identify as the cause of the issue? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, Microsoft Dataverse log capacity. Option 2, network bandwidth. Option 3, network congestion. Option 4, network latency. Option 5, service level agreement, SLA. Correct answers: network bandwidth and network latency. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of identifying and resolving performance issues when it comes to going live with a Microsoft Power Platform solution. In the scenario, network latency is an issue because the physical distance between the source app and destination server is playing a significant role. With the user being based in the United Kingdom and the application being hosted in the United States, a time delay is very likely occurring when data travels from one point in the network to another. Network bandwidth is also contributing because insufficient bandwidth can lead to slow data transfer speeds, resulting in longer wait times for the United Kingdom user when interacting with the Power Apps app. Dataverse log capacity manages audit data. Dataverse log storage does not consume storage capacity and therefore will not affect the performance of Power Apps. However, when Dataverse itself, where business data is stored, reaches its capacity limits, it can negatively affect system performance. Network congestion issues arise when multiple users are accessing the application simultaneously or when the network infrastructure is overloaded. This can lead to increased latency and reduced available bandwidth. In the scenario, however, the user reports that the issue is occurring even during off-peak hours, when there is not high network usage. SLAs are implemented to describe the contractual agreement in place with Microsoft to ensure performance standards and compliance. The SLA itself would not be a cause of the app performance issues for the user in the United Kingdom. You are creating a Canvas app where employees can submit their expense reports to Microsoft Dataverse. When a report is submitted, it must be automatically routed to the employee's manager via email. The manager will review the expense details, provide comments, and either approve or reject the expense report. You need to add automation to the app to route the expense reports to managers. What should you do? Option 1. Create a new flow and use the send approval and follow-up via email template. Option 2. Create an approval pre-validation plugin that notifies a manager that an expense report has been saved to Dataverse. Option 3. Create a business rule on the expense report table that displays a manager approval checkbox. Option 4. Create a new flow and use the click a button in Power Apps to send an email template. Correct answers. Create a new flow and use the send approval and follow-up via email template. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of designing and implementing a collaborative integration by using Power Apps and Power Automate. Adding a flow using the Power Automate pane within Power Apps Studio triggers automation within a Canvas app. The send approval and follow-up via email template allows you to send a request for approval when a Canvas app button is selected. In this scenario, the manager is the approver and can view approval requests in the Approvals Center and in email. When the manager responds, an approval or rejection email will be sent to a recipient as a follow-up. Using a pre-validation plugin operation will not meet the requirements because the logic runs before the database transaction occurs and the expense is saved to Dataverse. This type of plugin is typically used to validate logic that might cancel the operation before the database transaction. Using a business rule to show and hide an approval checkbox does not meet the requirements of routing an approval to the employee's manager by email. Business rules provide a simple way to implement and maintain fast-changing and commonly used rules. Using the Power Automate template, click a button in Power Apps to send an email does not meet the stated approval requirements for providing comments and approving or rejecting the request. You are designing a Dynamics 365 implementation. Global admins must be able to give new employees their required security roles in Dynamics 365. You need to set the security approach for the project. You must use the minimal amount of configuration. What should you do? Option 1. Set up Microsoft Entra ID group teams. Option 2. Add the security roles manually. Option 3. Create a Microsoft Power Automate flow to assign roles. Option 4. Create an Azure function to assign roles. Correct answers: set up Microsoft Entra ID group teams. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of different possibilities for assigning security roles to new employees. To make it as easy as possible for global admins, you should set up teams related to Microsoft Entra ID security groups and assign the correct security roles to those teams. Whenever a user is added to one of those teams in Microsoft Entra ID, they will be added to the team in Dynamics 365. All permissions from the security roles will be granted to the user. Assigning roles through Microsoft Power Automate or Azure functions is not recommended because out-of-the-box functionality exists, and the scenario specifies that you must use the minimal amount of configuration. Adding security roles manually is not recommended and would add significant work for the global admins. You are designing a Dynamics 365 implementation. Managers must be able to edit their subordinates' rows wherever the subordinates are located on the business unit hierarchy. You need to select the appropriate Dynamics 365 capability. Which capability should you implement? Option 1. Business units. Option 2. Column-level security. Option 3. Hierarchical security. Option 4. Security role. Correct answers: hierarchical security. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of different security capabilities in Dynamics 365. Hierarchical security can be used to create a security model across business units. The direct manager of a user can always edit the user's rows, whether or not the manager and user are in the same business unit structure. Business units are also used to separate data but do have a strict hierarchy. Managers can view their subordinates' data only when the manager and subordinates are in the same business unit or when the manager is in a higher business unit. Security roles are used to set permissions at a per-table level. They cannot be used to implement the requirement in this scenario. Column-level security can be used to give a group of people access to a certain column on a table but not to the whole table. You are designing a Microsoft Power Apps app for an airline company to monitor the company's social media platforms. The app will collect real-time social media analytics from a third party by using a custom connector. Employees must be logged into the app to be able to interact with the data. Testing of the app indicates that employees will exceed the number of API requests they are allowed to make per day. You need to determine which Microsoft Power Platform limit will be exceeded. Which limit should you identify? Option 1, concurrent requests. Option 2, entitlement. Option 3, non-licensed user request. Option 4, service protection API. Correct answers, entitlement. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of the Microsoft Power Platform and API limits that exist and their purposes. The use of entitlement limits represents the number of API requests that an employee is entitled to make each day. API entitlement limits are based on a 24-hour period, which in the scenario will be exceeded in a day. The allocated limit depends on the type of license that is assigned to each employee. In the scenario, employees have a Power Apps license. Non-licensed user request limits are established for certain activities such as background processes that do not require a user to interact with the service. In the scenario, licensed Power Apps employees are working with the app and therefore, the non-interactive limits will not apply. Service protection API limits are set to ensure consistent availability and performance of services for everyone. These limits are only evaluated when making extraordinary API demands within a 5-minute sliding window. Concurrency is the sending of multiple requests from the same employee simultaneously and is limited to 52 concurrent requests. There is no indication that the app is using concurrency or sending concurrent API requests. You are designing a Microsoft Power Apps solution for a heavy equipment company to manage its fleet of vehicles. The IT director asks you to use a common fleet management schema in Microsoft Dataverse to expedite the data model creation. You need to identify the appropriate data modeling approach. What should you use? Option 1, Automotive Accelerator. Option 2, Default Solution. Option 3, Default Common Data Model. Option 4, Logical Data Model. Correct answers, Automotive Accelerator. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of the data modeling options and standards available in Microsoft Power Platform to support a complex set of requirements. The Automotive Accelerator includes an industry-standard automotive data model that can easily be enabled within Microsoft Power Platform. The Automotive Accelerator expedites the data model creation by installing industry-specific tables and attributes that dealerships and original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, commonly leverage. These entities include deals, sales contracts, specifications, fleet, and vehicles. Using the out-of-the-box common data model only provides a common language for business entities that cover a full range of business processes. It does not include an industry-specific automotive objects out of the box. It would need to be extended and customized to support the requirements. The default solution is a special solution that contains all components in Dataverse. The default solution is useful for discovering all the components and configurations in your system, but it has no relevance to designing or expediting the creation of the fleet management schema. Using a logical data model is a way to show how data flows through the system before getting to the physical implementation. A logical data model does not provide a common fleet management schema or expedite its creation in Dataverse. You are designing a Microsoft Power Platform implementation for a company. The company works with one of your partners. You need to ensure the implementation meets the following requirements. The partner's users must be able to connect from their tenant to the company's tenant. Users in the company must not be able to connect to the partner's tenant. Which part of Microsoft Power Platform should you configure? Option 1, Cross-Tenant Access, Restriction Outbound. Option 2, Cross-Tenant Access, Restriction Inbound. Option 3, Microsoft Entra ID B2C. Option 4, Environment Security Group. Correct answers, Cross-Tenant Access, Restriction Outbound. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of cross-tenant security. Cross-tenant access makes it possible for external users to connect to your tenant. When outbound is restricted, your users cannot access the other tenant, but users from the other tenant can access your tenant. When inbound is restricted, it is reversed. Your users can access the other tenant, but users from the other tenant cannot access your tenant. Microsoft Entra ID B2C does not meet the requirements because Microsoft Entra ID B2C is a business-to-customer relationship and the scenario is about two businesses. Environment security groups can restrict access to certain environments within your tenant. They are not capable of allowing users from other tenants to access yours. You are designing a Microsoft Power Platform implementation. The solution design uses Azure Functions for integrations. The Azure function requires a user to authenticate the Azure function against the Microsoft Power Platform environment. You estimate the integration will have about 20,000 requests per day. You need to determine which license to use to meet the integration requirements. Which license should you select? Option 1, Power Apps Pay-as-you-go. Option 2, Power Apps per user. Option 3, Power Apps Portals. Option 4, Power Automate per flow. Correct answers, Power Apps per user. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of API request limits. The Power Apps per user license includes 40,000 requests per user. This license can also be assigned to a user that the Azure function will use for authentication. The Power Apps Portals license includes only 200 requests and only allows users access to a Power Apps portal. The Power Apps Pay-as-you-go license includes only 6,000 requests per user in day. In general, users can be licensed by pay-as-you-go, but the included number of requests would not be sufficient for this scenario's integration. The Power Automate per flow plan includes 250,000 requests, which is much more than the expected number of requests in the scenario. In addition, the plan must be assigned to a flow and cannot be assigned to a user. You are designing an app for an internet provider. Workers for the provider go to people's residences to sign up prospects for internet packages. You have the following Microsoft Dataverse tables. Prospect, custom table used to enter a prospect's contact information. A prospect will have many associated notifications. Notification, custom table with internal notifications about the prospect. Workers can create and delete notifications. You need to ensure prospects cannot be accidentally deleted when notifications are present. Which relationship behavior should you use? Option 1, Custom, Cascade All Delete. Option 2, Parental. Option 3, Referential, Remove Link. Option 4, Referential, Restrict Delete. Correct answers, Referential, Restrict Delete. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of the different relationship behaviors that exist in Dataverse and how they can be applied to restrict and prevent the deletion of data. Using the one-to-many referential behavior type with restrict delete prevents the prospect from being deleted when related notification rows still exist. In this case, the prospect record can be deleted only when all the child notifications have been cleaned up and removed. Using the referential behavior type with remove link only severs the relationship between a prospect and notification. In the scenario, all notifications need to be deleted prior to deleting the prospect, so this behavior will not apply. Parental relationship behavior is the least restrictive and will delete the parent record, the prospect, and related child table records, the notifications, at the same time regardless of whether the notifications have been removed. Using a custom relationship behavior with Cascade All Delete will perform the delete action on all related notifications regardless of whether they have been removed. You are designing an environment strategy for a logistics company. You plan to include out-of-the-box governance capabilities. You begin to create the environment for the distribution team that must include the following requirements. Canvas apps that are built must only be shared with a maximum of 2 users. The IT administrator must receive a weekly email with a list of active app users. You need to ensure the distribution team's environment meets the governance requirements. What should you do? Option 1, set the environment refresh cadence. Option 2, use an environment security group. Option 3, use the environment's administration mode. Option 4, make the environment managed. Correct answers, make the environment managed. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of designing an environment strategy for an organization and identifying the different environment capabilities available to support governance best practices. A managed environment offers out-of-the-box governance capabilities that simplify, automate, and streamline IT administration of Microsoft Power Platform. This includes out-of-the-box capabilities like sending the administrator a weekly usage insights email and limiting how widely Canvas apps can be shared. Setting the environment's refresh cadence is used to set how often you want to receive updates from Microsoft for features and certain Power Platform services. Assigning a security group to an environment is a helpful way to restrict access to the people in that security group. However, that alone will not meet the requirements in the scenario. Administration mode is used when you want to make operational changes to an environment and ensure regular users cannot log in and affect your work. You are designing an integration between two apps for onboarding new employees. Employee data will be entered into a model-driven app. The data must then be automatically written to a human resources application without user interaction. The application has no API or connector and will be installed on users' computers. You need to integrate the employee data into the human resources application. Which integration solution should you use? Option 1, Attended Desktop Flow. Option 2, Azure Logic Apps. Option 3, Cloud Flow. Option 4, Unattended Desktop Flow. Correct answers: Unattended Desktop Flow. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of designing an integration solution and of the integration technology available in Microsoft Power Platform. An unattended Power Automate desktop flow using robotic process automation (RPA) meets the requirements because the desktop flow can connect and integrate into an application where no connector or API is available. In the scenario, the human resources application has no API, is a desktop installed application, and does not require user interaction, which means that using an unattended desktop flow is the best option. Logic apps are designed to interact with cloud-based services, connectors, and APIs. In the scenario, the human resources desktop application does not have an API or connector available, which means logic apps cannot be used. Also, logic apps cannot connect to an unattended desktop flow, only Power Automate Cloud Flows can. Power Automate Cloud Flows alone cannot connect to the human resources application without a cloud-based service, connector, desktop flow, or API. The cloud flow would need to first connect to an unattended desktop flow to write to the human resources application. Attended flows are initiated on demand and allow a user to interact with a desktop flow if necessary, such as when a decision is required. In the scenario, it is stated that data will be written automatically to the human resources application without any user interaction, which is using unattended mode. You are designing an integration for a credit union that is implementing Microsoft Power Apps. A client of the credit union has banking transaction data that changes rapidly and is kept in a core banking system. The data must be stored only in the United States. The credit union requires the Power Apps integration to the core banking system be in real time. You need to choose the appropriate categorizations for the integration. Which 3 integration categorizations should you use? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, Batch. Option 2, Licensed. Option 3, Regulated. Option 4, Time Sensitive. Option 5, Volatility. Correct answers: regulated, time-sensitive, volatility. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of designing integrations using an organization's existing systems and how the solution architect would classify the different data sources they encounter. In the scenario, the core banking data is described as rapidly changing, and therefore, it should be classified with high volatility. It is also mentioned that the data should only be stored in the United States, which is a common requirement for regulated financial institutions. Lastly, integration timing is important because the banking transaction data is time-sensitive and must be available in Power Apps in real time. Licensed data classification is not appropriate for this scenario because there is no indication that the data is licensed or that there are any limitations that might affect the use of data. There is also no indication in the scenario of how large the volume of data is or if it is significant enough to classify the volume. The scenario indicates that the data needs to be available in Power Apps in real time, and therefore, there is no requirement for batch classification. You are designing the Application Lifecycle Management (ALM) process for a Microsoft Power Platform solution. Developers are customizing Microsoft Dataverse tables in the Common Data Model. All changes to the data must be tracked for every object. You need to ensure that the data is tracked. Which two actions should you instruct the developers to perform? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, include all components. Option 2, include entity metadata. Option 3, add table subcomponents. Option 4, publish all customizations. Correct answers include entity metadata. Add table subcomponents. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of designing ALM processes. The requirement to track changes to the data indicates that table-level auditing is required for every table. To ensure this setting is transferred accordingly to downstream environments, the entity metadata for each table used in the Common Data Model should be included. If it is not included, then the setting will not be detected and transferred. Solution segmentation ensures only the required components that have been built or modified are ultimately deployed into downstream environments. Because every Dataverse environment contains the data structures for the Common Data Model, adding these components fully to a solution is unnecessary and could cause future issues, such as unwanted changes being deployed or dependency issues occurring. Therefore, only the table subcomponents should be included in the solution. Publishing all customizations is a common task that needs to be done after performing modifications in Dataverse, and it ensures all changes are made visible to users. Publishing customizations will have no effect on ensuring auditing can be enabled and factored in as part of the ALM process. You are designing the data model for a Microsoft Dataverse solution. You need to identify the tables that form part of the Common Data Model. Which three tables should you identify? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, Account. Option 2, Business. Option 3, Grant. Option 4, Marketing List. Option 5, Program. Correct answers: Account, Marketing List, Task. Explanation: this item tests the candidate's knowledge of working with the Common Data Model and identifying the key tables that it is made of. The Marketing List table provides basic functionality for collating and distributing marketing content to a list of customers. It is part of the Common Data Model and is available by default within every newly created Dataverse environment. The Task table allows users to record key activities with due dates against other rows within Dataverse. It is part of the Common Data Model and is available by default within every newly created Dataverse environment. The Account table allows users to represent other companies, often as customers or in business-to-business (B2B) scenarios. It is part of the Common Data Model and is available by default within every newly created Dataverse environment. The Business table is a custom table provided by the Automotive Accelerator. The Grant table is a custom table provided by the Education Accelerator. The Program table is a custom table provided by the Government Accelerator. These tables are not available by default within newly created Dataverse environments and, therefore, do not form part of the Common Data Model.